Hello and welcome to another podcast with me, James Waters, owner of Border Terrier Stanley and promoter of all things dog friendly via our dog friendly website and magazine. I'm here along with Steve Bennett, long-time owner of Whippets and founder of the dog friendly business in 2003. This week's podcast is about Canicross, the Doggy Podcast with Steve and James.
James, I know really very little about Canicross. Have you had any involvement with it?
Well, not officially or formally. My wife Nicola, she's actually taken Stanley, our Border Terrier, Canicrossing to an extent, and local bridle paths. She bought a sort of harness and then a wraparound belt and had to go with him, and he did a lot better than we thought. We also recently went to Goodwoof, and Stanley had to go there. There's a lot of activities there, and just it was with the proper equipment, so it's much more sort of comfortable with a proper harness on him and everything. And he's done a lot better than I would have thought, because he normally, if you take him round the block for a walk, every 10 meters he stopped 5 times. So I thought he'd be no good at carry on and running when there's lots of stuff around. So yeah, I was surprised that the dog like Stanley, a terrier, could do it quite well.
Well, let's find out more about Canicross.
Okay, we're delighted to have Emily Thompson, owner of 2 Canicross businesses, selling Canicross equipment and running a training business for Canicross coaches. She regularly competes at a high level in this growing sport. Emily first became interested in Canicross after a rescue husky collie cross. Tegan was banned from some other dog activities, which included flyball. Hello, Emily.
Hi there.
Hi, Emily.
Was that introduction about right? You're quite involved in the various aspects of the sport.
Yes, I would say I'm pretty immersed in the sport of Canicross now. I've been doing it for 15 years, so it's kind of become my life.
Some people might say Canicross is just running with your dog. What do you add on to that?
So a lot of people start thinking it's just running with your dog. And what I have discovered through my own experience and over time is there is quite a lot more to it than that. So Canicross is actually a specific sport of cross-country running with dogs, but you do need to have them attached to you. The person wears, they call it a waist belt, but really it needs to be situated on your hips so that it's not sort of causing you any problems in your lower back. So you have a proper belt on, not one of these sort of clip around jobs that you can get on one of the bigger online outlets. You want specific kit for this because it's designed to sort of protect your back. You want a bungee line so that your dog is, if they are pulling and if they do sort of jolt off to one side or another, you've got that element that takes the sort of shock out of it, the shock absorber. And then the most important part, in my opinion, is the harness for the dog, because the harness needs to be really non-restrictive and allow the dog to move as freely as possible, to try and sort of get their natural movement as much as possible. I think it's become widely accepted now that you stick a harness on a dog, it's going to change their gait a little bit, and particularly if you've sort of got a person then attached to that who's slowing them down. But the idea is that whatever harness you get, it's comfortable for them and really supports their running and their pulling for the sport. So it can be quite sort of technical starting out, choosing your correct kit. And that's sort of where I come in and help people get started and give them the best advice to sort of tailor options for them and their dog.
Often people run with a dog with a lead. The dog, if it's not practiced at doing this, will stop and start. Is there something about this equipment that helps the dog to know it's got to keep running, or is that just part of the training?
It can definitely help to signal that, putting the harness on. I think a lot of people in a lot of sports would say, the equipment, if you have specific equipment to do it, the dog sees it, the dog feels it on them, and they know they're going to do that job. So that definitely helps, but definitely 100% training, because people will, all the sort of worries that people have, oh, I'm worried my dog's not going to pull. Well, you train them to pull. You actually do have to, even if your dog is a natural puller and just pulls you along anyway. I always tell people to cue it, because once you cue it and you can then control it, you can also then train them not to pull when you want them not to pull, because that's another worry that people have, is if they train their dogs to pull, they're worried that they're never going to get that sort of loosely walking back. Well, you definitely can. You just need to make sure that you're actually training your dog to pull. And there are other cues, obviously, that we teach our dogs, directions. There's a whole sort of raft of cues that we use to help have that sort of enjoyable experience, so that you're not just being dragged around the countryside, which I think is what a lot of people think, but it's actually like any other sport that you would do. You need to train for it, and having that element of control over your dog makes it safer as well.
How do people actually compete in Canicross?
The competitions are, I suppose, a sort of a group of people that enjoy the competitive element, and perhaps enjoy the fact that the competitions are all over the country. So you've got people like me who have competed, even though I wouldn't say I'm particularly athletic, or a particularly successful runner, but go along because they enjoy that element of seeing a different place. So there's probably, I would say, around about 1,000 people competing in the UK. It's not a huge amount. And you won't get, I mean, the biggest entries at an event are around about 200 in one place at a time.
And what sort of distances are they doing?
Yeah, so the majority of races are around 5K. That seems to be, and I'm not 100% sure why, but that just seems to be the sort of the standard Canicross race distance. But then you have got races 10K, and you even have, there are a couple of dedicated race organisers who do like mountain marathons and things like that. So you can actually do up to ultra marathon distance with your dog if you really want to. Obviously, the numbers start coming down when you're talking about that distance, because there's only a certain amount of people that are going to be able to train for that. But you've also got human trail events that allow canicrosses now. I think it's becoming more widely recognized as being, part of the trail running community, and so they will allow a canicross entry at some of the other events, which can be really nice as well. And that's always longer distances, or tends to be longer distances.
It just made me think of one thing, is it the dog or the human that needs more training for these long distances?
Yeah, a bit of both, I'd say, to be honest. It is quite taxing on the dog. I think people sort of think, oh, my dog runs around, and they go out and we go for walks, and my dog runs miles more than me. But having them actually attached to you and having them pulling a weight in the nicest possible way, like some people are obviously going to be more of a load on their dog than others. That's quite a physical demand, and so you do need to actually train your dog in harness up to those distances. I've actually done a couple of the longer routes in the UK. So I did the West Highland Way with my dogs many years ago, and sort of did that over 5 days. But I've also done the Cotswold Way, because that's near me, and I did that again over 5 days, and it does take quite a bit of training with the dogs as well.
How did you get into this activity?
So my backstory is I did that thing that naive dog owners do, and I hold my hand up to this. I frequently admit all the mistakes that I made. I got a rescue dog, a husky collie cross called Tegan, who I just went to the rescue kennels. It was at the time when you just went along and sort of looked and took out dogs that you thought might fit in. And she was beautiful. I didn't know anything about the breeds particularly. I'd had a collie cross as a kid, but never anything to do with husky. And took her home because she was just gorgeous and wild, and I thought she'd be great fun. And she was great fun, but she was also a bit of a nightmare. And she suffered really badly to begin with separation anxiety, which was a huge problem because I had to go out to work and leave her at times. So I started really focusing on what I could do with her in the time that I spent with her to fulfill her needs, basically. And we tried all sorts of things. We tried normal dog training classes, and we got asked to leave. We tried agility classes, and we got asked to leave because she was quite dog reactive. We tried flyball, and we got asked to leave. And you can see this pattern and how it goes. And I was determined to try something for her because I really wanted to give her the best life. And somebody said to me, why don't you try Canicross? Because there's a lot more space and all the dogs are moving in one direction, and people tend to be a little bit more accepting of dogs that are reactive. And I was like, well, I don't really like running. Why would I do that? But I gave it a go. I started training just on my own at home, doing a little bit, and then went along to my first race and was just hooked from that point on because everyone was amazing. It was, she would bark at another dog and people just wouldn't even bat an eyelid. And I was like, oh, somewhere finally where we can actually just focus on our training and doing stuff. And it did make such a difference to her behavior and her attitude towards other dogs because they were all on leads, so there was no dogs getting in her face, and it was a game changer for both of us.
And isn't that calm that's required for some of the other dog sports? There's not so much of that required in Canicross.
I would say that you get that calm. That calm comes while you're doing the activity. So if you've got a dog that's very high energy, once they get going, they really settle down and they focus. And I think what I discovered for her was that obviously that mix of the husky, which was essentially bred for long distance pulling sleds way back when, and the collie, who was bred to work sheep all day, needed that that endurance sort of activity to keep her mind and her body sort of happy, which we weren't really getting from the other activities because they were shorter, and it was more of a winding her up situation, whereas this allowed her to just calm down and get into the flow of doing something which she felt was her job.
Emily, how did you go from enjoying Canicross with Tegan to running two Canicross businesses?
Basically, I started finding out more. I've got a bit of a brain that works, that I want to know more about everything that I'm doing, and I started getting more interested in the harnesses, and I couldn't get the colours of the harnesses that I wanted for my dogs. And I know that sounds really, it sounds really sort of like just get the colours that were available. But no, I really wanted my dogs to have specific colours when I started doing this. And I know a lot of people can relate to that, but I literally got in a few bits and pieces and said to a few people that I knew, look, I'm gonna get some kit in. I think I'm gonna start selling it just to sort of cover my costs. And I'm going to these events because I started going to the events every other weekend. I might ask if I can take some kit along and see if other people want to, and it all just kind of went from there. It really was a hobby business, the retailing, that eventually led to me giving up my office job and doing it full time. And of course, then I decided that I wanted to take it even further. And so everything that I was sort of learning, I wanted to teach other people. So that's where I've gone with my other business, which is the Canicross coaching business.
Just for people that are thinking about Canicross, what are the things to consider when trying it? Because you've really promoted it well. Do you need to be outfit, and can you tell if your dog would be good at it? I've got a border terrier. Is that a no-no for Canicross?
Absolutely not. And one of my friends has a border terrier called Betty, who is just the best Canicross dog in the world. She has done ultra marathons with her owner, so it definitely doesn't rule her out. And I think that's what I loved most about it when I started looking at it, was how inclusive it is, because I wasn't fit when I started to do this, but you build up your fitness together, you train together. So I would never have imagined that I could have run 100 miles over 5 days when I first started this. But you just build up slowly, and together, like I said, and you get there. So you don't have to be particularly fit to begin with. It helps if your dog is sort of structurally okay to do Canicross. So if you've got a dog that has got potentially issues within their body that could cause a problem, then you might want to consult with a vet about that. So for example, the brachycephalic breeds that have shorter snouts, obviously dogs need to be able to breathe really well for Canicross. But that's not to say that they can't do something. And we have got boxers that do it, we've got pugs that do it. It's just a case of sort of managing that, and doing it in line with a veterinary professional to make sure that your dog is safe to do it. But we have people that run with dogs that have 3 legs. We have people that run with dogs that have all sorts of different medical conditions, but they manage it. And the same with people. So I think that's one of the things that I loved most about it is that it is so inclusive. And people sometimes look at it and go, oh, I can't do that because I'm not fit enough, or I'm overweight, or I'm this. And actually there are ways around it, and there are ways that you can just build up slowly. And actually you can, although we're talking specifically about running Canicross, you can use the same equipment and canny hike, and just sort of make those walks a bit more a bit more fulfilling, and use the same voice cues, and also just make it a bit tougher for yourself, and your dog by making it sort of all on lead, and working together. So it is very inclusive. I know it's one of the things that people sort of say, oh, well, I'm not fit enough, I could never do that. But honestly, if you're thinking about it, if you'd even slightly like to give it a go, I'd say just try it, because it does really change lives.
Emily, I'm assuming there are now lots of brands in Canicross. Are some better than others? And is it expensive to kit yourself out to have a go at Canicross?
It can be expensive, but expensive is relative, really, because when you're buying running trainers, I think that's probably more expensive than your whole kit put together.
Yeah.
Because running trainers can sort of be £100 for a decent set of trainers. In general, your Canicross harnesses range from about £25 to up to about 100. So it's quite a big gap depending on which you go for. Belts start off at about 35 and again go up to about 100, and lines are all around 20 to 40 pounds. There's not that much difference in those. There are certainly brands that are more recognized for Canicross than others. That's because the design of the harnesses is more suited to having dogs pulling in them. So some of the kit out there, people say, oh, you can run with your dog in this, but actually when you analyze the harness, it's not ideal for Canicross. So for example, I like there to be no adjustment on the neck of a Canicross harness, because it puts uneven pressure through the front where they're going to be pulling into it. So a lot of people say, oh, I don't want something that's got to slide over my dog's head, but actually that's better for your dog when they're pulling in it, because you've not got different pressure points when they're pulling into it. So it's things like that that make the kit, certain brands of kit are better because they are specifically designed for dogs to pull into, rather than just being a walking harness or a general everyday harness, that kind of thing.
So Emily, you set up a Cotswold Canicross group. Is Cotswold a particularly good place to do Canicross? Is there more of a community there, or how UK wide is the sport?
It's massively UK wide. Like there are now social groups all over the country, and unfortunately, Cotswold Canicross has sort of been pushed to the wayside while I do all the other things that I'm doing all the time. But there are some really good groups around the Cotswolds, and it is a really nice place to run because you've got a lot of footpaths around here, and Canicrossers can basically go anywhere that you can walk. So if you think about all of the footpaths that you've got near you, it's definitely a nice area to do it in. But I can think of lots of other places that are really good areas for canicrossing as well. And you sort of want to think about places where you can go where you're not going to get sort of stuck in fields of livestock with dogs, and there's not too many other sort of hazards to think about with dogs, because although they're all on a lead all the time, you still don't want to be like running through fields of sheep and stuff. It's just not great if you're in a big group with lots of dogs.
Yeah, for sure. So where are the competitions that you've visited?
I have been to competitions down in Cornwall, and as far up as sort of north of Inverness in Scotland. So
Right.
there's a couple of sort of Canicross groups now that try and advertise the events. I try and advertise the events, but there's so many going on, it's quite hard to keep up. But they mainly take place in forests, because forests tend to be quite a nice place to have an event, and it's a you've generally got a decent car park for all the competitors and a cafe and that kind of thing, because everybody that canicrosses quite likes cake as well. I'm safe to say that.
Right. Okay.
Things we reward ourselves.
Extra benefits. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cake is definitely a benefit of running. And so they are all over the place. But I noticed that one of my friends up in Scotland has just announced her race. She runs a race in October on the Isle of Mull. So they can be anywhere.
I'm intrigued by your UK dog triathlon. What's that all about, Emily?
Yeah, so I don't know how many years ago it was now. I think it was back in 2016. I had this crazy idea that I wanted to set up an event, but something that was a bit different for everyone, to the norm. And I had tended to take my dogs to do some swimming in the summer as sort of a bit of cross training, and when it's warm, not really supposed to canicross because obviously the dogs can get too hot. So what else do? You can take them swimming. So I decided to set up Tri Dog, which is essentially a triathlon with your dog. And there was a lot of testing in the initial stages to see how it would work with transitions, because we know there are a lot of reactive dogs that do canicross. So it was how we manage a transition area where people have got to come together and have their dogs with enough space that all those dogs could cope with that situation. So the first thing that we did was we did like a duathlon, bike to run, and tested out the transition area. And then we've got a fabulous venue in Bedfordshire called Box End Park. They are so dog friendly, and they welcome us with open arms. Let us just get on with it. And they said, yep, that's fine. You can have dogs in our lake. And we chose an area of the lake which was sort of safe, that you can see on all sides. I have to say it's my biggest worry every year that we do it, because dogs and people in water can go horribly wrong. But touch wood, we've been okay so far. And the competitors come along. It's usually quite a big thing for people because they've never done anything like it before. And they do an 80-meter swim. And people that have done triathlons go, 80 meters? That's nothing. And I'm like, try it with your dog. It's really hard work. It is, you come out of that lake after 80 meters and go, thank God that's over. Because it's quite tough training a dog to swim with you, and you're so focused on them and what they're doing, you forget about yourself. So you come out of the water, you transition into the bike section. So there's a sport called bike joring where the dog pulls you on a bike as well. And we've done a lot of that also. So you need to train for that. And that section is about 2.5 kilometers. So you bike around the edge of the lake, and then there's another transition area where you then transition for your Canicross section, which is another 2.5k. And just for me, I love the event because seeing people coming over that line and that sense of achievement when they've actually done that with their dog it's worth all the stress of running the event, to be honest. And the bond that people get with their dog when they've got to do all those different elements of training, it's just fantastic to see. I love watching people take part.
So you didn't just stop there with doing Canicross and selling the equipment. You also started a training business for Canicross coaches. So tell us how you got into that.
Basically, Canicross coaching is something that anybody could set up and do. And what was happening was that a lot of people were wanting more advice. They were wanting to be taught Canicross, much in the same way as, you have a PT that teaches you how to use stuff in the gym. People were saying, well, I don't know where to start. I'd like somebody to teach me. And so various different people had set up and were doing things. And sometimes it was actually personal trainers that were sort of adding it as a service onto their existing business. And what we were seeing was that these people were fantastic at what they did in terms of personal training, but they didn't have the dog side of the Canicross to add to it. And so we were like, well, this is more than 50% about the dog, in my opinion. Like, everything is about the dog in my world. And so we wanted to put out some training that meant that people could come along to us and learn about how to actually teach people with their dogs and the important things about Canicross. Because although it seems relatively simple, there are lots of considerations in terms of making sure that your dog is fit and healthy for it, in terms of making sure that all the equipment fits properly, making sure, at the moment, the weather is really warm, so we don't want people going out and doing lots of Canicross when their dogs could potentially overheat. And all these kind of things that were based around the dog and looking after the safety and the welfare of the dog. Because there have been running coaches around for years and years and years, but Canicross was a new thing to be coaching people in. So we set up a company called Canicross Coach, and we started training people to teach people and gave them a bit of a structure to the sessions, and made sure that people were aware that just because it's a dog, you do still have to warm up and cool down with them in the same way that you do with people, because a lot of people were just sort of getting dogs out and just going off straight away because the dogs were excited and the dogs were raring to go, so they just immediately start running. And I mean, if you think about it, it makes logical sense, but I can hold my hand up now and say, I didn't do any warming up and cooling down when I first started, because I wasn't a runner. It didn't cross my mind. So this is the kind of thing that we're teaching people, sort of good practice. And we actually set up the only qualification in Canicross coaching that's available through the IPET network. It's Ofqual regulated. And that was just to provide, again, a kind of standard for people, so that they know that if they're being taught by one of our Canicross coaches, that they have been through this process of training and they're going to get looked after and they're going to get taught in a safe way for their dog.
So back to basics. I've got my Stanley. I want to sort of try Canicross tomorrow. What do I do?
So the absolute first thing that I would do is make sure you're happy that Stanley is fit to go. So you've got no problems, and you're happy that he's not going to be detrimentally affected by it. Once you're happy that they are fit and healthy to go, then I would have a look at beginning to train your voice cues on your walks. So you can literally just go out on a walk, and when you turn left, call the cue left, so that your dog starts to learn that means left. Same with right. There are a few others that I would immediately start off with, but I wouldn't start teaching your dog to pull until you've got them a proper harness. So I would definitely go out and get your dog fitted by somebody who knows what they're doing to get a proper Canicross harness, and then choose a belt and a line for yourself. That's a bit more about what is going to suit you and feels comfy on you, and you can tell us that. So that's a little bit easier in terms of choosing your kit. So once you've got your kit, you can then start training short distances with your pull cue, making sure that your dog knows that it's okay to pull, because we spend quite a lot of our time with dog training teaching them not to pull. And so it can be quite confusing when you first start Canicross that you're actually saying, yeah, okay, you can pull me now. But like I said, as long as you're teaching that and cueing it, when they do, they will learn that that's when they're allowed to pull, and then they can, be taught the loose lead stuff and the, to heel, whatever you want to do, as well as your Canicross cues. So, I mean, you can go out today if you wanted to and start practicing your voice cues. It's just that I wouldn't train the pulling until you've got the proper harness.
So how do dogs relax after a Canicross event?
It's actually, it's a really good point, and I'm really glad that you've brought that up, because they do need rest and they need to be able to process what they've done, because it can be quite physically demanding, but also mentally demanding, because they're having to listen to you and work out what you want them to do. So they do need to rest. What we need to be aware of is to cool them down first, so that they're not just being put back into a car or into a smaller space. So, because they're just like us, they will stiffen up if that happens. But giving them a chance to relax is a really, really good part of your sort of Canicross routine. And we actually see a canine massage therapist who checks them over for any sort of strains and sprains, and we've been taught to do sort of just gentle massage that will help. But absolutely, it's the same as people, so we need to think about our dogs as athletes and treat them as such. They all need the same thing in terms of a recovery, and definitely massage and physio is part of that.
So Emily, remind people where they go to find out more about Canicross and where to buy equipment from yourselves.
So you can come and find my website. It's www.caninetrailtime.com, and I'm on social media. Come and get as much information as they want to, and then ask me any specific questions.
Thank you, Emily. We're looking forward to featuring Canicross in the magazine shortly, if we can find out more from you as well, Emily. And it would be great to see also if you could enter the Dog Friendly Awards as a small dog friendly business, because we're launching the awards on the 1st of August. And it'd be really great to see people recognising the work you do for dog businesses through that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to. And thanks for having me on, because you can probably tell I love sharing how great the sport of Canicross is. So I really appreciate being asked on to talk to more people about it.
Brilliant, Emily. And we've certainly learned a lot about the sport, I think, today. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Emily. You can find out more about Dog Friendly Magazine at www.dogfriendly.co.uk.